Hello and welcome back to Shamrock Sports, our third episode of the academic year. I'm Tyler Reidy alongside JJ Post. JJ, great to be with you. There's magic in the air. First home football weekend of the year.
Absolutely. I mean, Navy was technically a home game, but I think we all know it's a little more special to be back in South Bend, have it under touchdown Jesus, and ready to start the season off with after a nice week 0 game. Now we got week 1. Now college football is really getting underway.
Now we've got a lot to talk about with Irish sports here today, but first, breaking big news on this Friday in the world of conference realignment. Another domino has fallen. For more on that, let's go to Jacob Irons.
Thanks, guys. As we continue to add on to realignment conversation, breaking news out of the ACC earlier today. They would add 3 premier institutions in Southern Methodist University, Stanford, and Cal to their slate. And this adds a lot to the organization when you talk about the ACC and realignment, not just adding for college football, but ultimately for Olympic sports in general. When you look at Stanford volleyball coming into the mix, Stanford women's basketball, you look at SMU's baseball program adding as well, all to being premier athletic and academic institutions within the ACC that is continuing to add on. But really the biggest thing when you talk about this is when you start moving around for money, and right now the move for money is a really interesting conversation. SMU, during the new requirement, would not receive, under the current gesture, that they would not receive any media in this revenue on that. However, on the other side, Stanford and Cal would get 30% and increase up when they're to the 7th, and by the 10th, they would ultimately be at 100% receiving what a normal ACC school would be. So this adds a lot of implications for what the ACC should be, and really also has implications here at home with Notre Dame. As Stanford moves on for their football program to be an ACC, could that mean the yearly rivalry between the California school and the Irish becomes an ACC slate instead of one of their rivalry and non-conference games they have to schedule? Back to you guys.
Thank you, Jacob. Big news in the world of conference realignment. It will affect the vast majority of Notre Dame's athletic programs and teams, 2 of which we'll get to later on in the show. But let's begin with the independent Notre Dame football team we all know and love. A 42-3 beatdown of Navy on the Emerald Isle. JJ, dominant performance across the board from the Fighting Irish. What stood out to you about the 39-point victory?
I mean, really everything stood out to me. You know, you could highlight really any element of this team and have it be a positive review. But for me, the linebackers are the big takeaway, because last year against Navy, one of the things this team struggled with, it's not that the defense was bad per se, but they struggled to adjust as Navy changed their offensive game plan. This year, the linebackers, an experienced trio of 3 graduate student, seniors, players that have been around this Notre Dame team for a long time. They've seen a little bit of everything, and it showed against Navy. They looked prepared. They looked ready to adjust in the middle of the game, even as Navy tried to throw wrinkles and they tried to do trick plays like they always do. This Notre Dame team looked well prepared. I think a lot of that is how much trust Al Golden has in his graduate student trio of linebackers. This team will be taken as far as the linebackers can take it, at least on the defensive end. Notre Dame's defense last year, was a top 30 unit, but it didn't really push that elite level they needed it to really carry an offense that wasn't really anywhere near the level of the defense. So the good but not elite is a fine place in Notre Dame defense to be when you have a quarterback like Sam Hartman. But this year, I think Notre Dame defense can push into that elite tier if they take the next step. Under Al Golden, the first year it had promise, but it also had some things that really couldn't happen in 2 years. The red zone defense, for example, was abysmal. Navy, on their 2 red zone trips, didn't get much of anything going. That is a sign of progress that we needed to see from the Notre Dame defense. I think this is going to be a much improved unit. I think the linebackers are going to be the key to it.
Absolutely. And let's talk about the environment a little bit. Notre Dame, it was technically a home game this time around in their 3rd trip over to Dublin, and the Irish felt right at home. 40,000 or so Americans making the trip over, some of them rooting for the Navy midshipmen, but the vast majority rooting for the Fighting Irish. And the fanfare was phenomenal all weekend long in Dublin. The bars were packed with Fighting Irish fans. There was a band performance in the early afternoon leading into the game, and the environment within Aviva Stadium was tremendous as well.
You can only expect as much. It's the Fighting Irish. It's a team that Ireland really, in the past, has embraced a little bit. And now they got to see them in person the second time. Last time it obviously went really well. This time another very good run through.
Absolutely. So let's move on to this week's game against Tennessee State, but it goes well beyond just the college football gridiron. It is a story greater than college football itself. Notre Dame, for the first time ever, not only facing off with an FCS opponent, but an HBCU, a historic black college or university in Tennessee State. For more on that, let's throw it over to Ryan Murphy.
Thanks, guys. It is a beautiful September day here outside of Notre Dame Stadium, one day away from the home opener, and you can feel the excitement in the air. Big game tomorrow in terms of historical significance. It's the first time Notre Dame will host a historically black college or university in program history when they welcome the Tennessee State Tigers to town. HBCU football holds an important and special place in American sporting and cultural history. It was a central part of the African American sporting experience for much of the 20th century. It endured a golden age from 1966 to 1975 that saw 48 players drafted in the top 50 of the NFL draft. The two universities will be hosting a number of special events throughout the weekend to commemorate the important occasion. Yesterday, the two universities combined for a panel on the importance and role of HBCUs in U.S. higher education. Today and throughout history, they also hosted a conversation with Dr. Glenda Baskin-Glover, the TSU president. Today, Tom Mendoza was featured on a panel with Eddie George, the head football coach for Tennessee State, and the women's basketball coach for Notre Dame, Niele Ivey, focusing on leadership and diversity. And sports archivist Greg Bond has curated a special collection over at Hesburgh Library focusing on the history of HBCU football. That's open this week and this weekend and throughout next week, so there's plenty of time for you to check that out as well. Lots going on this weekend. Always a lot of excitement for the home opener here outside Notre Dame Stadium. But this weekend, it's set to be special. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Ryan. What a tremendous story shaping up here in South Bend as Tennessee State visits Notre Dame Stadium to take on the Fighting Irish. Now let's get into the X's and O's. Talk about some players to watch here for tomorrow's game beginning at 3:30 p.m. JJ, a lot of standouts last week in Dublin, but some room for improvement as well. Who do you see really stepping up and playing a major role against TSU?
On Notre Dame's side, the defensive line really comes to mind to me. This is a unit that over the offseason got a lot of focus because Notre Dame needed it to be something it hasn't been for a while now. They don't have any one star, I'd say, in the defensive line. You know, Isaiah Foskey last year was a guy you can rely on to rack up 10-plus sacks. They don't really have that this year, at least probably not, and I don't think we saw anything in the Navy game that indicated we'd have a 10-plus sack guy on the roster. But what this unit could be is a unit that goes 8 deep, a unit that can play every down against the run, against the pass. They don't need to rotate, but they can rotate. You know, I think Notre Dame needs its depth to be a stronger factor than its playmakers, per se, on the defensive line this year. I think, you know, guys like Joshua Burnham have a really big chance today to stand out because they'll be playing an offensive line that hasn't been tested this year. They'll probably get a lot of reps in. You know, the young guys like Junior Tuialamaka, Joshua Burnham, you know, maybe some Jason Anye on the interior. These are the guys on the second unit mostly that have a chance to push into the first unit if they stand out. This will be the game where they can really break through.
Absolutely, and looking at the other side of the football, I think wide receiver Tobias Merriweather in his sophomore season needs to step up heading into this week. Didn't see a ton of action last week against Navy. Had one drop. Sam Hartman also tried to hit him down the field in the end zone, but the pass was broken up at the last second. Merriweather, a guy who showed a little bit of potential last season. There's that famous 41-yard first catch as a collegiate, first touchdown as a collegiate against Stanford last season. But you know, that's really it as far as career highlights go for him. But what have we learned from Sam Hartman so far? He is more than willing to spread the football around, whether it's tight ends, who we also didn't see much from last week, but young wide receivers like Jaden Greathouse, the freshman who caught 2 touchdowns in his collegiate debut. Jaden Thomas had a nice game as well. He used his running backs. Sam Hartman can spread the football around. He's not afraid to get everybody involved, and Tobias Merriweather needs to be right in the middle of that.
Absolutely, and I think Notre Dame's going to use this game as an opportunity, really. You know, Tennessee State's secondary was quite good last year, actually, but I think we know that Notre Dame's receivers look like a unit that can have the chance to grow this year. They look like a unit that is deeper than they've been, at least in the past few years. Tobias Merriweather, though, is kind of that X factor. If they can get a vertical threat, we know guys like Thomas, Greathouse, Tyree, you know, they'll be able to move the chains underneath. If you want to really open up the underneath, though, you need someone that's going to unlock the deep ball. Tobias Merriweather could be just that. Looking at the passing attack on the other side of the game, though, I want to highlight Draylon Ellis of Tennessee State, the quarterback. Freeman gave him a shout out in the press conference and said, we got to keep this guy in the pocket. This is going to be the player that if Tennessee State wants to shock the world, wants to pull up the upset of all upsets, he's going to be right in the middle of it. You know, you look at the quarterback as often kind of the dynamic player on the team, and Ellis is, in every sense of the word, just that dynamic level of player. You know, he's someone that when he gets his legs, he can create out of structure. You know, you want to keep him inside the pocket because when he gets pushed outside the pocket, that might be where he's at his best. He can get going in the open field. He can make players miss in the open field. You know, you see here on the read option, he's got speed and he's not afraid to use it. You know, the camera can hardly keep up with him as he goes to the end zone for that touchdown. A player that I think for Tennessee State, you know, again, it's going to be long odds. It's going to be a game that, they enter with high expectations of merely just competing. That would be really in itself a victory for this Tennessee State team. I don't think there's even a spread for the game. That's how little the odds makers are giving them credit for potentially staying in this one. But if they do stay in this one, and if they even win it, it's going to be Ellis who's at the center of things, because he is a player that if everything clicks, he can make things happen. We'll see how much things click, though.
Yeah, how about the swagger there from Ellis as well after that touchdown clip. So all eyes in South Bend here are on tomorrow afternoon, but last night, Thursday evening, college football got off and running in a big way in week one. Let's take you around college football, beginning in Minneapolis with the Big Ten opener, Nebraska and Minnesota. Points were at a premium in the first half, and here you see Trayvon Jones picking off a red zone interception just before the break. But then Nebraska, on a wacky trick play, would find the end zone as Jeff Sims hooked up with Alex Bullock for his first collegiate touchdown. But Minnesota, with under 3 minutes left, drives down the field, and on fourth down, a hookup from Ethan Kaliakmanis to Daniel Jackson ties the game. Ensuing possession, Nebraska's Jeff Sims intercepted again. This time it's Tyler Newbin returning that out close to midfield. One more run play by Sean Tyler on 3rd and 13 would set up the Golden Gophers with an opportunity to kick a field goal and win the game. And from 47 yards out, Dragan Kesic would win it. And Minnesota takes the opener 13-10, spoiling Matt Rule's debut as the head coach for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Later on in the evening, we head out west, Florida and 14th-ranked Utah, and it was all Utes from the get-go. 70-yard touchdown pass from Bryson Barnes to Money Parks gets it started. Then Nate Johnson on the RPO takes it himself, weaving through defenders to find the end zone from 27 yards out. Florida would make it a little bit closer later on, but Utah had it never in doubt. 24-11, the final score in Salt Lake City. So a couple outstanding college football games last night. It was a full slate. What did you like from last night's action, JJ?
I mean, it was great to just have it back. On Saturday we had the start of the college football season, but really, no true premier games on that schedule. No Power 5 against Power 5 games. Last night we got two great ones. Florida's a team that I don't think they're going to be at their best this year, but it's still Florida. At the end of the day, that's a team you're going to tune into, whether they're good or bad. And Utah is a good team. That's a team that's going to shock a lot of people this year. To do that without their starting quarterback, without a whole lot of starting level players, they had a big injury list heading into the game, and to look that dominant, that says a lot about a team and its resiliency and its ability to look deep. Utah I was really impressed by last night. And then, of course, some classic Big Ten West sicko football at the end of the game. A 3-0 halftime score. That's Big Ten West if I've ever seen it. Really, maybe not the most fun to those of you who like scoring, but those of you who like pure trench warfare football, it was a beauty.
There you go. Good to see it again with Northwestern Rutgers on Sunday. We've got college football tonight, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. A lot of games to look for. So let's talk about the games we're keen in on for this weekend, week one on the college football slate. JJ, we'll start with you. You're heading to a rematch of last year's wild week one game, Florida State and LSU.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, wild. That's all you could say to describe last year's game between LSU and Florida State. Last year, the game was characterized by two teams trying to kind of find a breakout year, and two teams that did eventually find a breakout year, and two teams that entered the season very unknown. It's not the same this year. This year, these two teams are very much known. Two teams that, in the eyes of many, are dark horse playoff contenders. These are teams that if you win this game, they're entering the rest of the season with a whole lot of momentum. If you get a top 10 win here, if you're Florida State and you beat a top 10 LSU team, or if you're LSU and you beat a top 10 Florida State team, that gives you an air of legitimacy, because it's not like Florida State or LSU are exactly unknowns here. These are two teams that produced last season and they have earned the hype they've earned. But right now, that hype for the playoff is just that, hype. A win over a top 10 team, at least in this season, gives you that extra energy heading into next week. I think it's going to be a really good contest. These teams are going to have a lot to play for. They know they want that opening statement and the boost in the polls it would come with. I'm really interested to see who comes out firing first.
You see that game Sunday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. My game to watch takes place the next night, Monday evening, Labor Day, an all-ACC affair between Clemson and Duke, and not just two potentially high-powered ACC teams. Clemson, last year's ACC champion. Duke coming off a 9-win season with former Irish coach Mike Elko. Duke and Clemson are both on Notre Dame's schedule this season. The Irish will head to Durham September 30th. They'll head down to Clemson for a marquee potential college football playoff play-in game on Saturday, November 4th. That one should be under the lights, but these two teams have plenty to prove. Duke trying to maintain the reasoning that last year's season, the 9-win season was for real. Clemson trying to get back into that playoff territory after a down year last season. And they got Cade Klubnik, a brand new quarterback as well, looking to prove himself.
I mean, Garrett Riley as the new offensive coordinator should be good for Klubnik. He's a guy that produced great things at his last stop at TCU, and Clemson's offense not going to be anything to be slept on. And Duke's defense under Mike Elko last year, really stingy unit. I think this is going to be a really good contrast between a team that's going to take a big step forward in offense and a team that returns a lot of players from a very good defense.
One of the best things about college football being back is having game day traditions all over the country and here in South Bend as well. Let's go to Kian Bagenstos to tell us more.
Thanks, guys. Certainly a lot of buzz around campus this week as the Fighting Irish will return to the house that Rockne built for the first time in 287 days to take on the Tennessee State Tigers, Notre Dame's first ever matchup against an HBCU. To get you guys absolutely amped and prepared for game day, we're going to go over some game day traditions and some history. Notre Dame Stadium is named after the legendary head coach Knute Rockne, who had an overall 105 win, 12 loss, and 5 tie record and 3 national championships in 1924, 1929, and 1930. The stadium was built in 1930 after Knute's third natty. Before that, football games were played on Library Lawn. Now, Library Lawn is home to a pregame pep rally every home game day where the Leprechaun, cheerleaders, Pom Squad, Band of the Fighting Irish, Noble alumni like Manti Te'o and Jalen Smith, Noble alumni, and sometimes Freeman will hype up the crowd. Then, after game day mass, Marcus Freeman and the squad will march from the Basilica to the stadium to the delight of many adoring fans for the all-famous Victory March. The midnight before the game, everyone will gather to the main building or dome to watch the Band of the Fighting Irish perform the Drummers Circle. Residence halls will also run across the reflecting pool and jump in the Stonehenge fountain to celebrate the first game day. Now, Siggy does it the best. Inside the stadium, various chants include the Irish Jig, Celtic chant, and touchdown push-ups. After the game, win or loss, Notre Dame players and students alike will all embrace each other and sing the Notre Dame alma mater. If we win, the Leprechaun and a football player, a lucky football player, will switch headgear. Shirts called The Shirt that was unveiled by the shirt committee before the blue and gold game this year in April, which is our spring game. The official shirt of Notre Dame football, this shirt has unified the student body for the first home game since 1991. Senior Brandon Harbaugh in 1991 created the shirt. That is all for game day traditions. So now you know everything for game day, and you can brag at the tailgate about how much you know about Marcus Freeman and the Fighting Irish. Until next time, back to you guys in the studio. Go Irish, beat Tigers. Put me on a band, man.
Thank you, Kian. Myself, Tyler, Reidy and JJ Post, going to talk about one of our favorite college traditions around here in South Bend, covering some of the lesser-known collegiate sports out there. You're the big soccer guy. I'm getting into it as well. We got a big weekend. We got a big weekend coming up. The men's soccer team Friday night hosts Northern Illinois in its third game of the season, and then the women's team heads up to East Lansing. You and I will be there Sunday for the women's 5th game of the season. Now, JJ, we head into the month of September, conference play beginning about midway through the month on both sides. What is the importance of this month transitioning to the later portion of the season? Yeah,
I mean, it's really important. You know, you look at the women's team last year. Once they started out in conference play, that was when kind of that torrid hot form that started out in non-conference. It was a question of, like, how real is this? This is a team last year that started out 7-0, but there were still some questions about, like, okay, are they just beating up on bad teams, or can they do it in the ACC? Last year, once they proved they could do it in the ACC, you saw them shoot up in the national polls. The respect they got on a national level was just so much higher because ACC play means that much more, at least in the women's game. These are some of the most vaunted powerhouses play in the Atlantic Coastal Conference, or whatever it is soon to be named. You know, Virginia, Duke, UNC, Florida State. Notre Dame's not going to see all of those teams, but is going to see a lot of those teams. If they can get a win against one of those teams, because right now they've started out strong, but not perfect. If they can get a statement win against the likes of maybe a UNC or maybe a Virginia, that will do so much to boost the credibility of this team's eyes and also just the confidence as they head into the postseason. I think that ACC run really gave this team a lot of confidence as they head into the NCAA tournament last year. I think this year they're looking to do the same thing again. You know, make a run, beat some quality teams, tell yourself that you can play with the best of anyone. If they do that this year in the regular season, that'll carry over to the postseason.
Now let's start talking about the men's team. Both sides had phenomenal weekends, encouraging weekends last week, but the men had a very, very encouraging draw with second-ranked Indiana on Thursday night, 1-1 the score, and then they come out and they blow out IUPUI, taking care of business 5-0 behind a hat trick from Matthew Rue, a 7-point performance, Notre Dame's first 7-point performance on the men's side in 15 years. JJ, what have you seen from Chad Riley's side so far?
Yeah, I mean, the Indiana game comes to mind for me because you don't always need to win for it to be a successful night. And the Indiana game was good, a good showing of that, because this team did not win Indiana. They probably weren't even the best team on the field against Indiana, though it was quite close. But they looked like a team that had taken steps forward. They looked like a team that was unafraid of one of the best teams in the country, a national finalist last year. This is a team that has a lot of strong elements to them. The defense retains a lot of talent. The offense, you know, last season it was staggered. That was the problem. They had plenty of goal scorers, but none of them really scored more than a couple. This year, Matthew Rue already has 3. You know, it's something that I think they're still going to see some transition moments. We're still going to see this team grow, but they already look better than they did last year, and that in itself is a win for a team that had a strong 2021, but kind of a drop-off 2022.
And for Nate Norman's side, a women's team that had a questionable start, the opening draw with Milwaukee, but they've bounced back very well. A draw with Arkansas, 2-2 on a last-second goal Sunday, and now they head into an interesting portion of the schedule at Michigan State, then Michigan at home. A couple weeks from now, they'll open ACC play with Wake Forest. What can Nate Norman's team prove over the next couple weeks?
I think you want to see the freshmen keep on getting involved, because last year's team, there's no question about it, they lost a lot of talent. Olivia Wingate was kind of the trigger man up front for this team. You know, she was the player that they could rely on to score goals. Corbin Albert, one of, if not the best midfielder in the country. She's now at PSG. They lose a lot of talent, but the freshmen have started to show out. Slowly but surely, you're seeing players step up like Morgan Roy in the midfield, Meg Mrowicki up front. You know, these are players that are rookies. It's going to take them some time to get fully acclimated to the college game, but as they continue to develop, Notre Dame can start replacing the talent that they lost from 2022.
Notre Dame volleyball out in Villanova this weekend as well. The cross-country and golf teams open up play early next week as well. A lot going on around campus. But first, you're watching Shamrock Sports here on Notre Dame Television.
Director of Operations. On the link on the screen or in our description. It's an Amazon link, will take you straight to the site, and any purchase you make through that link, we receive a small portion of the revenue. This is a great way to support NDTV and get all those things you need for the perfect Notre Dame tailgate. I'm talking, you know, mugs and flags and hats and all the merch that you need. So make sure to click on that link and support NDTV. We're here for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elise. Now, if you haven't noticed, we have upped the ante tremendously on Notre Dame football score predictions here at NDTV. And last week, we got some standings to key you in on. Here's how the point system works for us. It's 1 point for predicting the correct winner. You get a bonus 2 points for getting closest with the score on aggregate scoring between the two teams. You see Ryan Murphy, the outstanding sophomore, our director of engagement and recruiting, was on it from the start, having Notre Dame blow out Navy. And, you know, the rest of us all had Notre Dame to win, so we're on the board, which is a good start. But, JJ, what do you like about the score prediction system opening this 2023 season, and how do you feel about your chances heading into the rest of the way?
Optimism pays off. That's what I learned from Ryan. You know, he picked the biggest scoreline and he won as a result of it. This week, you know, we see similar themes, a lot of blowout scores. Jacob Irons, traditionally more of the pessimist in the room. Never forget when he predicted Ohio State to win by 4 scores last season to open up the year. This time he's in with a comfortable 21-point win. Hey, if it's anything less than a blowout, Irons will win. So it's a little bit of game theory, which I appreciate about it. It makes you think about how you want to predict it, not just because, you know, this is what you think the score will be, but you think maybe this is the most likely score to hit, because everyone you see here is doing similar themes. I think Irons is playing the smart game here.
Those are our score predictions for the Tennessee State game this weekend. It's on tap Saturday afternoon at 3:30 p.m. We'd like to thank everyone behind the scenes here at NDTV and Shamrock Sports for their efforts here today, making this show possible. For JJ Post, I'm Tyler Reidy, saying thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the first home game weekend in South Bend for the 2023 season, and we'll see you next week on Shamrock Sports.